Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Smalley. I am the Assistant Director of Financial Aid Services here at the Coordinating Board. Welcome to this month's webcast. I'm so glad that y'all could join in. I've heard really good things, really good feedback about these monthly webcasts from the field and from coworkers, so I'm glad that it's doing positive things for the community. So we have a very full agenda today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about the 1920 program guidelines. On the last two webcasts I have gone through some of the updates, so today I'll be going through just a few more with you. And then, of course, why most people joined today was probably the ABCs of Financial Aid Database. We're going to be going through a lot of information surrounding this topic, so I hope that all of your FAD program officials are on and that you brought your questions. I do ask that people limit the questions, or I should say postpone the questions until the end, because I won't be able to answer those while I'm going through the information. So jot those down as I go through it, and you never know, I may answer your question as I'm going through each of the slides. And then lastly, I'm going to be going through upcoming events and deadlines with y'all, and that'll give you an opportunity again to send through the questions while I'm going through that section. So let's get started. So the 1920 guidelines, as of today, we have released 5 of those guidelines. We released educational aid exemption and work study about a month and a half ago, and we recently released the 3 grant programs. So the Texas Grant, TEOG, and TEG were released mid-May to the end of May. And then we are trying to get the 3 loan programs, College Access Loan, Be On Time, and TASK. We're trying to get those out later this week or at the latest early next week, so keep an eye out for those. Work study mentorship, we are in the final stages of getting those approved, and once they're done, those will be sent out as well. We do send a memo each time we release guidelines, but we also post them in our news you can use on our Student Financial Aid Programs webpage, and then they're located under the Program Resources section under the applicable program. So you want to keep an eye out for that. So let's talk about the grant programs briefly. Luckily, I've already gone through most of these updates in a prior webcast, so if you're interested in finding out more, you can either go back and listen to my prior webcasts, or you can submit an inquiry through Contact Us with your specific question. But let's talk about Texas Grant and TEOG. The sections that were updated were almost identical. There were some very minor changes made between the two, but for the most part, we updated the EFC priority. We previously had EFC as an eligibility requirement, and we removed that since we determined that EFC is simply a priority. There is no cap or limit, and we are working on some additional guidance based on some of the questions we've received, and that'll come out as soon as we have that approved. The controlled substance section in both these 2 grant programs was also modified slightly, but the information didn't change. We just tried to simplify it. So there's nothing that you need to be concerned that changed in the section. Just read through it to make sure it still makes sense. But we just kind of moved it around to make the flow better. Select a service statement, everyone's favorite. This is the same as the other 2 programs. Every single guidelines has the exact same select a service statement requirements and examples, but we included that in all the grant programs. So if you haven't seen it yet, please make sure you go and look at it and read through it. And then if you have questions, you can either ask at the end of this presentation, or you can send that through Contact Us. Give me just a moment. Okay, so the award chart. The award chart on the 2 grant programs, they were updated because due to summer awarding that we talked about in prior months, we wanted to make sure that the totals on the award charts were reflected accurately. So now Texas Grant and TOG, you'll see the semester amount is multiplied by 3. And we also added a little bit of clarification on summer awarding in there as well. And we actually are working on some additional guidance on summer awarding, but we're working with our data sub-collection committee through FAAC before we send that out to everybody. And then lastly, authority to transfer. This is something I went through on last month's webcast, so make sure you go back and listen to the whole explanation. But this is just my reminder that you need to send in the request to move money from work study to your grant program if you have work study money still left over after your spring term. So once your spring term ended, if you didn't expend all of your money, you either need to return it to the coordinating board because you're not going to use it. But what we are encouraging schools to do is to move those funds into your grant program. And the way you do that is you send a request through Contact Us to the coordinating board, and then we will contact you with the steps necessary to move the money, because we need to work with you to determine exactly how much you're eligible to move. And then you'll have to actually send the money back to us. We transfer it into your grant program, and then you can request those funds. And you'll have until August 1st to do that. But to start the process, the deadline is this Friday, June 14th. So make sure that you go through your work study program and you reconcile all of your students to make sure that you know if you have any funding still available, because you'll want to send that through to us. So let's just take a brief look at TEG guidelines. Selective service statement, same thing I just mentioned. The awarding section, we did include the summer verbiage, but please note that the annual amount for TEG didn't change. It is an annual award amount. It is not a semester amount, so it's different than Texas Grant and TOG, so you'll see that. We did update the tuition differential rates. The only thing is that the law schools that we typically include, because we released guidelines so early this year, we didn't have all the rates for the law schools. So if you're a law school, you will need to check back at a later point, and once we get those rates, we'll update it on the guidelines. And then the same reminder on authority to transfer. The deadline is Friday. Okay, so moving on to the big show, ABCs of Financial Aid Database. I'm going to give everyone a disclaimer that this presentation is really geared towards those that have familiarity with FADs. It's kind of an intermediate user presentation. So if you're brand new to FADs, or maybe you've only got one cycle under your belt at this point, some of this may be a little complicated, and that's because FADs is complicated. And if you've been working for a while, you know that there's been a lot of changes that have happened over the past 2 years. So again, my disclaimer is if you need additional training beyond what I'm going through today, that is available, and I'll discuss that at the end on how to request that. So just be patient. If you don't understand, you're not alone. So let's get started. So as of yesterday, June 10th, was the first day of cycle 2. So schools can start submitting their files, and the deadline to validate is August 19th. That gives you just over 2 months to get your file through the process and to go online to validate. So it seems like a long time, but as you know, other things come up, things happen, and these files take a while to get through. So we encourage schools to start submitting as soon as possible to give yourself enough time to get through the entire process. So yesterday in the memo, we did send out an updated manual, and I can't stress this enough to institutions that downloading the manual and reading through it from cover to cover is essential, because a lot of times we get questions that that are actually answered within the manual. It's just that a lot of people may not know where to find it because it's very, very long. So I'm going to just briefly go through the different sections of the manual and go over some reminders with y'all. So the manual that was released yesterday, nothing changed as far as the different sections. There's still 5 sections of the manual. We have our main overview, which has the file structure. It talks about the file flow, the different high-level notifications. So if you're brand new to FADs, this is a great section to read kind of what is FADs all about. Section 2 is the file layout. So this is really intended for your vendors, your programmers. It's so that you understand what your file is being run against here at the coordinating board. It's all the edit checks that we have in place here for when we receive your file. The third section is instructions. This is, what data are we trying to collect from you here at the coordinating board, and it gives you just an extra layer of information on what we need. Section 4 is the generated reports and notifications. This is a walkthrough of how to work your file, because there's no one on the planet that is going to submit a file where they get it through the first time. You have to go through a series of steps to get your file to the finish line. The last section is the appendices, and the appendices allows for just some additional information. We have our award chart, we have SAP clarifications, hardship, that type of thing. So it's just like some additional pieces that we found to be helpful over the past couple of years. So those are the 5 sections. Again, please make sure that you go and read it if you're new. If you're not new, it's always good to read it again. I read it constantly. I have it saved as a favorite on my computer because when people call me, that's where I look to reference the information and to find the answers. So before you begin submitting your file for cycle 2, I wanted to go over a couple of reminders. The first is that when you submit a file, it needs to be all-inclusive. And what I mean by that is that each cycle is not related to a specific term or semester. It is a comprehensive thing for the entire academic year. So we're in 18-19 academic year, which means that when you pull your file, it needs to be from the very beginning all the way up until the date you pull the file. So another thing is when you do that, you need to draw a line in the sand. Don't continue to pull your file over and over because you will probably never ever end. You're going to continually pull in new students. You're going to be chasing your tail at this point. So it's really important to just kind of, like I said, draw a line in the sand and work that file until you're done with it. The other thing is make sure you confirm that you're able to receive your notifications. Each institution has set up an email with the coordinating board where we email you your reports, sorry, not your reports, your notifications. So if you're new and you don't have access to this, you need to talk with your IT staff or someone who has access to that mailbox. If you're not sure what email we have for you, you can send that to FADB. Again, I will send, at the end of the presentation, I'll show you exactly where to email us. But you can check that with us to see where all your notifications are being sent. Another thing, make sure that when from week to week, that you're checking the as of date at the bottom of the manual. In the event we make a change, we do notify schools of the change, but with day-to-day operations, you don't always see every single update. So as you're working these files, make sure you pull that up just to make sure that you have the most recent copy. And lastly, review any modified items. We identify within the manual anything we change from cycle to cycle, and so I'm going to be going through those one by one today, but just again, if we change anything, you'll want to make sure that you look in the manual to see if there's anything that would impact your file. Let's talk about what changed. Luckily, there was not that many items. So this is for cycle 2. The data element number 68 and data element 69 were for Texas Grant TEOG award amounts. Because of the semester, the summer semester being added, we had to increase the amount of grant funding that a student could potentially receive. So you'll notice that the maxes for each one of them have gone up, and I listed the previous amount as well. Like I mentioned earlier, nothing will change for TEG because it's an annual award and it did not get increased. So those were 2 of the changes. The other change, one was for data element 57. We added a third option for initial and first award issued in the summer semester. So if you choose to pay out a student with grant funding, now you have an option to report that student on FADs. Number 112 is for the private schools. We added the not a TEG recipient but was meeting SAP requirement, and this helps with our allocation process. So you'll want to make sure that you code each one of your students correctly based on this fourth option that was added. Okay, moving on. So let's talk about the process. This is where things get real interesting. The first step, once you have collected your data and you create a file, is you're going to upload your FAD report into MOVEit DMZ. So that's what that first box is. Once the file goes through our process here at the coordinating board, it runs through a program, and then it moves to step 2. And that's where almost every school has a significant amount of time that they use to get through the process because it's very complicated. So that's what I'm going to take today to go through, is what are the steps you need to do to get through the process more efficiently. So let's talk about the generated reports. Once you submit your file to us and our program runs, each time you're going to get a set of reports. I can't stress this enough that you have to know what piece of the FADs you're working. We have some schools, they have one person. One person works FADs from start to finish. Other schools have specific people that work each piece of the program. But you all have to understand that there's a certain order that is the most efficient, and if each person is working a different piece, it can get a little bit messy. So this part of the presentation is really to kind of walk through the different reports that are available to see which one needs to go first to get you through that process. So each time you log into MOVEit DMZ after you've submitted your file, you're going to see some reports that are available for you to download. You'll see one that's called Program Comparison. You'll see a file called FAD 001, which is an edit report, and one that's the Reconciliation report. On your third cycle, you're actually going to get a fourth report, which is called the Unmatched SSN report, but because today we're just going to be talking about cycle 2, I'm not going to be going through that one. So let's look at each one of these individually to kind of talk through what is the purpose behind these. Program Comparison Report. This report compares data from cycle year to cycle year. So that means that if you look in this example where it says non-degree seeking, it has 386 students in 2019 for cycle 2. In 2018 cycle 2, there was 0. It gave us 100% difference, which is saying that you need to review that category of students because of the drastic shift between the data that you submitted. Some of these are going to change from year to year because maybe you added new programs, your student population changed, but overall, if you see a discrepancy or a percent change where we flagged it review, you really should go into your file and evaluate what happened from last year to this year that would cause such a drastic shift, because that means that the data that you have may not be accurate, and we want to make sure that there's data integrity with everything that's submitted, because we do use all this data for various things here at the coordinating board. So that's what the Program Comparison Report is. So let's talk about the FAD 001. This is the one that is worked the most because it has the most data within it. It's got 3 sections. It has the edit summary, which is on the screen, and that gives you a breakdown of all the different errors within the file. And so each time you download it, this is kind of your, I'll call it your report card that you can look to see how you're doing, and those totals should go down and down each time you resubmit a file. The second piece of the FAD 001 is your error report. This is where you need to begin, in the sense that you have to clear your student level errors before you move on in any more of the process. I apologize that it's a little blurry, but I'm going to go through this example. But within your error report, it's going to list each one of the students that has issues and then the number of errors within it. So in this example, hopefully you can see my mouse, you have the student here with their social security number, their name, ID, and then it has each one of the data elements with an error. So it's going to have a warning or error, the data element listed out, and then the edit message, and then what you included in the file. So, for example, on this student, it says that the institution student number cannot equal 0. That means the school submitted the file with a student ID number with all zeros, which is not possible. You have to enter some value in there. It also says that selective service was either 0 or 2, but that needs analysis was 1, and that mentorship was greater than 0. So what this means, if you go back to the instructions or the layout that I mentioned earlier, is that this student received money, so greater than $0, and they had a need analysis, which means that they went through the federal methodology, but there was 0 or 2, which was not applicable or not registered. So this student is not eligible for mentorship if that's the case. So there was $228 worth of mentorship, and they marked that the student's not registered for selective service. And it also flags if it's male. So if this student's female, then that wouldn't have come up. So hopefully that clarifies. That's kind of how you need to look at this piece of the report, but you need to go through each student to resolve the different errors before you move to the next step in the process. Each time you run it, you're going to get that report I just showed you where you can look to see if your total errors goes down. So you may start off with 500 errors, and as you chip away at it, it'll go down and down and down. Once you're done with resolving your student level data errors, you're going to, sorry, I kind of missed this step, but when you get to your file and you come across a student that has a situation where your data is still valid but you have a reason behind it, we have 1 through 17 are different scenarios that you can use to report what their situation is. So you would want to enter those into your report to align the student with this particular explanation. It's only when the student is exception code 11, which means it didn't align with any others, that you'll enter, and those have to be done the very last step of the FADS process. And I think that's another step that a lot of institutions tend to miss, is they want to resolve all their student errors before they reconcile their programs, and this step has to be done last, where you're using exception code 11. So all the other exception codes can be used during the student level resolution process, but exception code 11 has to be done at the very, very end. So once you get this report, a warning and questionable values, you do want to make sure that you're looking at this, even though this will not prevent your file on cycle 2 from being validated. But in this example, this is a warning that says that the student's age that you reported fell either below the age of 16 or over 75. And while that's not an error, because you could have a student that's either extremely young or extremely old to be going to school, it's possible. So it's just a kind of a warning to say, hey, this is kind of questionable, just take a look at me before you continue. So once you go through all your student errors and you get down to only those that have to be overridden, you're going to move into the reconciliation process. This is by far the most complicated, time-consuming piece that people run into, and so we're going to walk through it together, and I'm going to try and demo that a little bit for you. So let's look at step 1. That edit summary in the FAD 001 that I just mentioned is going to have a line that says total unreconciled programs. So this is going to be one of the things that you have to resolve before you validate. Once you pull this up and all of your total error records with your student level errors are cleared, you should only have your total unreconciled programs in here. This is going to tell you that you have X amount of state programs that don't reconcile and you have to fix. So you may be wondering how to identify this. The third report that I mentioned earlier was the reconciliation report. You can log into log into MOVEit DMZ and you'll download the report, and when you pull it up it's going to have all the different programs listed, and then the ones that are flagged reconcile on the right hand side are the ones that you need to be aware of. You need to review all of them, but the ones that say reconcile are the ones that don't match up with what the coordinating board has. So in this example, it's showing that the coordinating board count of students is 479. The institution's file has 483. And the amounts also are different. So we have 7,809,000 and 84, but this one has 7,820,884. So not only do the student counts do not match, the amounts do not match. So many of you may be wondering, well, where in the world do I get this? I mean, how do we know how to align our file with what the coordinating board has? So let's go through that together. The coordinating board totals are derived from various sources depending on the program. So the ones on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got the 3 grant programs, educational aid, and bilingual education scholarship. These programs are requested from the schools through a funds request form throughout the year. So once we receive those forms, we track those on a ledger, and then once we come to FAD's reporting cycle, we update those in our FAD system, our budget system. When you submit your file to us, it bounces against that data, and then if your file does not match what we have, that's when you receive an error. For your loan programs, we run a report in our loan system and we identify any funds that have dispersed as of June 3rd. So for all of these programs, we look at the date of June 3rd. That's when we have dispersed the money to your school. So with the loan programs, we pull that out of our loan system. With our Texas College Work Study, once we send your allocation and we send you those funds, unless you return any money to us, it's what we've sent you as of June 3rd. So a couple of important notes. When you are sending us your educational aid funds in your file, you need to exclude the institutional match because we're only reconciling what we have paid to you. And since we don't pay your institutional match, if you send that amount within your file, it's not going to align with what we have. So keep that in mind. If you participate in work study mentorship, please note that the totals are going to be from the June 5th financial report. So if you have not submitted that yet, you need to submit that report to your contact here at the coordinating board. And if you have questions on mentorship on how to reconcile, you'll want to send that through the FADB email, which again I will provide later in the presentation. So as you can see, another reason I mentioned earlier, you'll want to pull your file and draw a line in the sand is because if you continue to pull week after week, it's going to keep pulling in new disbursements, new students, and it really will become difficult for you to align your file with what we've paid out to you. Because again, we're using June 3rd as our marker. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so moving on. Once you identify in your reconciliation report the state programs that you need to reconcile, and you do the analysis, you're going to determine one of two things. You're going to see that your file is incorrect and you're going to fix it and you're going to resubmit it to us. Or you're going to say, hey, you know what, coordinating board, our totals are correct. These students are missing from your totals. Your amounts are wrong, and you're going to want us to update our information. that's when the FAD reconciliation form is used. As of yesterday, the form was updated. I don't know if you can see it well on my screen, but some of the differences are that there's no longer a drop-down box. We created check boxes now, and it's just enhanced so that people can submit them easier. But overall, the structure of the form has remained the same. So if you need to reconcile one of your state programs, we ask that you use this new form to submit it to us. So I'm going to go through an example. This is a grant example for Texas Grant. On the top of the screen, you'll notice that it says the FAD Reconciliation Report. This is a mock-up, and it shows that the coordinating board has 1,500 students, but the institution's file has 1,750. So there's 250 extra students showing on the school side. On the renewal population, 2,500 students on the coordinating board, but only 2,250 on the institution, so it's 250 less. So on this example, on the reconciliation form, you would need to send that through to us to fix the coordinating board's totals if your totals are correct. On the form, you're going to include the amount of students that you're changing the file by. So in this example, you're going to enter 250 students in the student count that you're increasing it by. There's no change in the money on this example. For your renewal students, you're going to put 250 decrease by, and then you're going to enter an explanation into the box. So in this scenario, it was simply just a miscoding. It was just misreported to the coordinating board, so you just need us to flip-flop your numbers, and we can update that for you. So let's move on to loan reconciliation. Loan reconciliation is a different process. As of June 3rd, the coordinating board pulled the students that had disbursements, and we uploaded something called a student detail report into MOVEit DMZ. It's within your FAD output file. You need to download this file, and you'll compare it to the file that you're submitting to us to verify that the gross amounts match. If they do not match, then you'll update the amount over in this institution response column, and the amount that you're going to be returning or that you have returned to the coordinating board, and then the explanation of why you're making that return. In the event that the list is missing a student that you have in your file, you have additional students from our list in gray, you'll add them to the bottom section, the amount that you paid, and then the reason here, why it didn't align. So again, every day that passes past June 3rd, you may have additional students that show up in your file. So in this example, Sue Smith, we have at the coordinating board $9,175. Institution only paid $8,175, and they're returning $1,000. They also have apples, oranges, where they paid $2,500. So this is one additional student that they want to add to their student count. So let's look at the form. So when you submit the form, you're going to mark the appropriate loan box here. You're going to add in the number of students in addition to what we already had in the file. So again, the gray box had all of these students listed. You're only adding one student. So you're going to add the one student here. You're increasing it by that amount. And then you're also going to add the amount that you're increasing, the total CAL that was dispersed. But notice that the amount here was $2,500. But because you returned $1,000, I had to subtract that from the total. So the amount on the reconciliation form would be $1,500 to increase it by. You do not need an explanation on the reconciliation form because your response is already on the student level detail. Once you're done adding and adjusting the students on the student level detail, you do need to upload that back into MOVEit DMZ and notify the coordinating board that you've completed that process so that we can get those explanations and review it against your form. Once we've reviewed all of the reconciliation that you've sent in to us, if you require that, what we do is we update that on our side and we send you a notification letting you know that your reconciliation has been updated. This is when you need to resubmit your FAD file. If you don't, your errors are still going to be showing on your summary, your edit summary. So it has to reset the program to make sure that everything gets cleared out. So once you submit your form, we review it, we update it, we send this out to you. On the right hand side, this is the email notification you're going to get to that email box you have set up with us. And once you get this, that's your indication that you need to send your file back through. You will not move along in the process if you don't do this step. So once you complete the reconciliation process, this is the point when you get to override those last remaining students, the exception code 11. Again, you cannot do this before you've reconciled your programs. Otherwise, they'll get rejected. These are done on a case-by-case basis, and they are emailed directly to FADB, and someone physically reviews that for you and then approves that request in the system. On the right hand side is a template. Again, this is in the manual, so if you need instructions, there's a more thorough process in the user manual. So once you submit this through and they're approved, then you're going to get your validation certification notification, and that is letting you know that all the steps have been complete. So once you get this, you're going to want to look at all your reports one last time. You're going to look at your program comparison, make sure that all your student details are cleared, your reconciliation is cleared. All of those should be cleared. Otherwise, this is not going to pop up when you log into CBPass. This is the very, very last step. The link will appear once you're ready to validate. And once you validate and you hit submit, there's really no going back. It's a done deal. You're done with this cycle, so it's really critical that you're checking all your data before you submit it. So that is the process. I am going to go through it one last time, very high level. First step, you submit your file. You send that through MOVEit DMZ. Once we get it, we're going to provide you all the different errors for your students. You're going to review those and clear those errors. Once you do that, you'll reconcile your programs against the coordinating board's June 3rd dispersed totals. Once you've cleared all your state programs, you're going to submit any overrides for that exception 11. After those get cleared, you're going to check all your stuff one last time before you validate or certify. Since we're in cycle 2, you're going to be validating. So that is a high-level run-through of the process. And I am going to go through this last piece. I think I mentioned this several times now, that if you have general questions on FAD processing, reconciliation, you're stuck on a student level error, you can't figure it out, maybe you're having processing problems, getting your notifications, send an email to FADB. It's FADB at the thecb.state.tx.us. And the reason you want to send it to this account is we have multiple people working that inbox. If you send it to someone specifically, they may be on vacation, out sick, in meetings, in training. So it's critical that you send it to this box, because otherwise your email may go unseen for days. We have a very, very small team at the coordinating board that works FADs. If you have MOVEit access issues, send it to useraccess at thecb.state.text.us. That will help us get you set up properly. If you need to add or move users to MOVEit, we can do that for you. So that is how you contact us for FADs. And lastly, I'm going to open the floodgates here. Please submit questions that are related to what I was just presenting on. If you have specific questions to your file, your process at your school, or something that we need to take offline, please submit that through the FADB email box. We're hoping to get questions today that would relate to all the schools that are on the call. They can be related to FADs, the guidelines, or anything else. And I'm still going to actually go through one more section, but I wanted to at least allow schools to start sending through questions, because I'm going to have some additional people on the call today so that they can help answer questions if needed. So please go ahead. I'm going to check in on my webcast here. Okay, so if y'all can begin submitting. I'm going to have 2 guests come in to troubleshoot questions. Okay, so upcoming events and important dates. So updates. I told you the loan program guide should be coming this week or early next week. An update on educational aid exemption. The 1920 application FAQs will be out as soon as the Appropriation Act is signed. We are working on finalizing that this week, so we will have that posted and available. We are finalizing allocations. Those should be out next week, so we'll be sending those out and also posting those on our website. The auto grants process, I brought this up on a prior webcast. We are automating how you request your grant funding. So next month's webcast will be going through that. So please stay tuned for that process. And then net price calculator. There was a delay on opening net price calculator, but it is available. So the deadline was moved to June 28th. So if you have questions on how to submit data, or if you're new to your institution, please send in a contact us if you need assistance so that we can set up either training or walk you through the process. A couple of important dates. As you know, Cycle 2 opened up yesterday for FADs. That's what we've been talking about. So please start submitting your file. The earlier, the better. The deadline I mentioned on authority to transfer is this Friday. You do have to submit the request for the transfer. It does not have to be completed by then, but you have to at least initiate that request with us through Contact Us. I just mentioned the net price calculator deadline is at the end of June, June 28th. And then, of course, next month's webcast is July 9th. So please tune in. We'll be doing multiple topics, which we'll send out in the next couple of weeks. And I think that is it. So it looks like I have some questions coming through. I have Deshae Reed and Tanya Trevino here. They're going to be assisting me with questions. So give me just a moment. I'm going to turn over the mic to them. Okay. Can you go over the data element changes for 1920 again? It's the only question I've got so far. I see people frantically typing though. So let's let me get on that slide. Let's see my baby. Okay, hopefully that popped up. So I'll go over the data element changes again. Number 68 and 69 are the grant award amounts for Texas Grant and TEOG. The amounts have been increased from the prior amounts to allow for summer awards. So those are 2 of the changes, and then the other 2 changes. Number 57 allows institutions to now report the initial or first award for the 3 grant programs if you issue an award in the summertime. And then number 112 is to allow private institutions to report students meeting SAP but who did not receive a TEG award. If the student is not a TEG and did not meet SAP, you're now going to select option 2. So that is in the manual, but I just wanted to point that out as well, since that changed a little bit from last time. Okay, let's see if we have any more questions. Okay. Do we send the questions about net price calculator to FADB email? No. Please send net price calculator questions to Contact Us, which is located on the SFAP webpage or any of the coordinating board web pages. Just click on Contact Us and select not only your institution, but financial aid question in the drop down. That way it gets routed to our area. Will your PowerPoint be available in the email? I post the PowerPoint and the recorded presentation online on our SFAP webpage under Stay Connected. It takes about a week or two. It really depends on how quickly we can get it up, but it will be posted to YouTube, and then the PowerPoint will be saved in a PDF. Okay, Yvette, it says TEOG SAP 111, since they were reported as first times in cycle 1, will they now be a 1? We're reviewing that. Hang on.
For cycle 1, you should have reported all your students as a 3, which is related to reporting cycle 1. Going into cycle 2 and 3, this is dependent upon whether or not the student has met the SAP requirements. That's when you will determine if it's going to be a yes or a no. So to answer the question about reporting them to be a 1, it depends on if that student has met the SAP requirements. So you just want to make sure that you're reporting the student as of the time that they should have been meeting their SAP requirements. SAP could change between cycle 2 and 3, depending on what that student is doing, especially for the summer. As you all recall, for the grants, they're allowed to have some awards in the summer, but if you do award summer grants, you do need to factor in those hours into your SAP calculation. So again, just as a repeat, cycle 2 and 3 is dependent on how that student met the SAP requirements once they have finished their enrollment.
Okay, the next question is from Gabriella. It says, I am a new financial aid director and I need to update my information with you guys. How do I do it? If you're trying to update your information for FAD purposes, you can send that through FADB. If you're trying to update general user access for CBPass, HelmNet, or MOVEit, then you'll submit a user access form. And since y'all know I like to demo everything, I'll just show you on the screen. So what you'll do, if you can see my screen, you'll go to the Student Financial Aid Programs website. Under online resources, there's a system authorization form, and as the director you'll fill this out and e-sign it right here. E-sign it, fill out all the appropriate sections on what you're trying to add or remove, and then you submit it at the bottom to the coordinating board, and once we receive it, we will send you a notification letting you know your credentials or any changes. So that's how that process works. Let's see. Vanessa, if a student did not receive Texas grant during fall, spring, can they get a summer award only? Is this an initial year student or a renewal? Is it a specific, Vanessa? I don't see you typing. Initial, sorry. If the student qualifies for an initial year award, then you can award that in the summer. What I would recommend is, if you want to go through this one-on-one, is to submit that through Contact Us, and we can give you a call to go through it. Since summer's new, we've been setting up conference calls with people. One of the reminders I just got on the FADs is when you set up your FAD notification email with us, it has to be generic. It can't be to an individual user. So even though you may want them to come directly to you, it has to be generic. Okay, any other questions? I'm not seeing any more coming through. I think that's about it. I do have one more reminder that I'm going to show y'all, which is I apologize, my PowerPoint is not cooperating. All right. I just wanted to make sure that y'all were familiar with, let me scroll to the end since it's not working. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that if you have specific questions for me and this presentation, you can email me directly. Webcast, I have a survey available that lets me know, one, how I'm doing, and two, any topics that you're interested in us training you on. So if you can go on, this is available online, and it's also on the flyer that we sent out. And then of course I have our two toll-free numbers. We have our financial aid services phone line, which is intended for schools, and our TFAC phone line, which is intended for students trying to get eligibility information. Let me check one more time that we don't have any more questions, and then we are going to wrap up. I do not see any more, so I want to thank everyone for joining. I hope that this was beneficial to everyone, and we will be posting this online soon on YouTube, and we'll send out a notification as soon as it's available. And I hope y'all have a great week, a great summer, and hope to see you next month. Thank you so much.